Your name?
Okay, I am Carmel Jean Toffley Huntley, and
When
very
were you
happy to be.
born?
I was born in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, Canada,
Okay. And,
and I was born on November the 9th, 1932.
hmm
And I saw a little bit of the old and a little bit of the new, and I'm very happy about that.
What do you mean old?
The old is watching my mother and dad. We went hunting and fishing, making sausage and salami, making homemade wine, watching the grandparents, doing the old things, like going to the farmer's market. Grandpa had a farm. And then to see him going from the farm to opening a sewer and contracting business, buying an old post office and converting it. A lot of the old things. Watching a fellow go down the road, selling meat and chickens. The stores weren't close like they are today. And more will come to me as we go along.
Okay.
Okay.
And what were your parents' names?
Hugo Toffley and Angeline Acavati Toffley.
Okay. And, was there anything unusual about the circumstances of your birth?
My mother had a very difficult time because she had a midwife
Okay.
and then finally got the doctor. I was an instrument baby.
What is an instrument baby?
Well, they used tongs to pull the baby out to help turn the baby around in those days. I still have scars from a couple of bald spots on the head from that.
Okay. Does your name have any special meaning to it?
Yes, my grandmother, Acavati. Her name was Carmel Acavati.
Okay. Does it mean anything in particular? Is it just a family name handed
As far as I
down?
know, it's just a family name. I don't know if there was any meaning to it at all or not.
Okay.
In fact, Grandpa had 40 acres where the farm was, and they subdivided it. He put in the sewers and such, and named one street after Grandma, which was Carmel, and after my mother, Angela, and Caesar after himself, and Nicholas after the oldest boy.
Okay. And what's the first home that you remember?
Okay, the first home I remember was on Wallace Stairs. It had the main center room. Well, you walked into the kitchen, and then you walked into the main center room, which 2 bedrooms and a bathroom was off of that, and then there was a smaller sitting room that they had. But at that time, when I was really young, I mean that's the way it ended up, but at that time when I was quite young, Mama had a beauty parlor. So the 1 bedroom and sitting room were converted into a beauty parlor and sitting room.
Mm-hmm.
They had a kitchen down the basement,
Yeah.
and I used to sleep. Well, at that time it was a bungalow, and then Grandma and Grandpa moved in with us, and Dad added the exact duplicate upstairs, and I used to sleep in the upstairs bedroom at Grandma's. It was a nice house. I liked it. We didn't have we had a lot of neighbors, but I didn't have many children to play with. There was only Gordy, who lived next door, and Mary Lou and Shirley Stairs, and I guess that was just about it as far as young people around our own age.
Who was your best friend?
I had several. Mary Lou Innocent and Shirley Stairs. And then as I got older, I had more friends. But I mean, that was it in the immediate neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
Because like I said, we didn't have many. Gordy was just there, not a close friend, but we chummed around. And then, of course, we had a back lane, and in behind there was a bush, as we called it, where we used to go picking flowers and playing and hiding and etc. It was kind of fun, you know. We didn't have a lot of toys, but We used to get cans and stick our feet into the cans and run around making all kinds of noise. A rope, skipping, we did what they called double dutch. It was two ropes that you skipped on like this, called double dutch. What else? Marbles, checkers, Chinese checkers, cards as we got older. With Mary Lou had two brothers and a sister, and as we got older we used to play cards all the time, and everybody cheated. I mean, that's the only way we played, except Reno. Reno took the game so serious, that poor guy. He gets so mad at us. But we played for pop, and we had toothpicks, and whoever got the most toothpicks would get a half a glass of pop. Couldn't afford a whole glass, you'd get a half a glass of pop. And poor Reno, he never ever ended up with anything. I feel so sorry for him. He was such a nice kid, but he took everything so serious. But not us, we used to cheat. We all cheated. It was the only way to play a game and have fun, see who could get away with it.
Oh no. Do you still have any favorite things that you had as a child?
A doll, which is in that bedroom, in that guest room. In fact, I bought a new dress for her and a little bonnet the other day.
What does the doll look like?
Oh, the eyes open and close, and it used to be able to say mama, but it doesn't say that anymore. I guess what would you call the face? It's like a plastic type of face. Eyelashes. And it's got the biggest smile. Since I got the new dress, it seems like it smiles better. It seems to me like she's happier. Real female, even the doll smiles. Twinkle in her eye.
Did you have any brothers or sisters when you were young? And
yes, I did.
when were they born?
I was 10 years old when Ronnie was born. After I was born, Mom had quite a difficult time to get pregnant again. And so it was 10 years before Ronnie came along. Cute. His hair was so blonde it was almost white. Chubby little thing. Adorable. I can remember him running into the beauty parlor. Amelia Bambaco loved Ronnie, and she would teach him all kinds of tricks. And the one trick, he would go into her and he'd lift her skirt and run like mad. He was only first starting to toddle, and evidently at one time what had happened was he had gone in there, and you know how children, that he's small, and he'd reach up with her and her skirt went up the very first time. Well, she just made a big deal out of that thing, and chase after him. Well, after that, he'd go into the beauty parlor and go like this and run like mad. He was only, 12 months old, 15 months old. He thought that was so funny, and of course she made a big deal out of it. He was so cute.
What do you remember about your room?
About my room?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it was Grandma's upstairs. It wasn't my room per se, that I had toys up there or anything like that. All I did was go up there and sleep,
Mm-hmm.
Grandma, when I'd wake up in the morning, she always had a cup of coffee waiting for me. It was mostly milk. She had naturally a coke stove, not coal. She burned coke. And
What's Coke?
Coke. Now, how can I explain Coke? It's little black pieces of Coke. It would look like your briquettes that you use on your...
It's a product of coal.
Yeah.
Is what it is.
And they would look like your briquettes that you use, only rougher, because... And that's what we used to use. Mom and Daddy did too. I know. I used to go down the basement and fill up a bucket that had a spout on it. And we'd fill that up with Coke and bring it up. Light the fire first, of course, with wood. But most of the time you tried to keep the fire going with the coals being hot all the time, and always red coals so that you didn't have to go through the whole procedure of starting the fire again, And the stove was, it would be the size of our kitchen stove, only another addition added onto it to make it a little longer, where they used to put in the Coke, And the other part would be like your oven, and then they had a warming oven up above to keep things warm. And I can remember going down to get the Coke and putting it in there, and then we had to clean out the bottom with all the ashes, you know. Then of course that went out, and they used to put that into the garden because it gave it like the garden like an acid, more acid from the, or so I was told anyway, from the ashes. It would be good in the garden. So I remember that. I can remember Mom on the stove didn't have a wash machine, so she would boil her clothes on top of the stove. And she had a big stick. Dad most of the time, Dad was usually around when she washed her clothes like that, because that's a lot of heat and a lot of weight to lift those clothes, you know. And she was short also like myself, and it made it kind of, you know, a little bit hot.
Now, why would you boil the clothes?
To clean them, you know, put soap in there and boil it. Because you didn't have like the bleach like you have today, and the hot water, no hot water tank. You used to have to bring that in.
So they used to bring the clothes to a boil?
Yeah. You brought your water to a boil, put your clothes in there, and then keep stirring it with this big stick so that everything would clean up good.
You ever burn the clothes?
No, you wouldn't, because it never got to that point, you know.
Did you have any favorite toys?
You know, that's one thing I don't ever remember having as toys, per se. I had a bike, I had the doll, I had a little buggy for the doll. I got a puppy at Christmas. But I don't remember, and some books. I had a favorite book, two favorite books. One was my dad's school book, and it had the nicest stories in it. And the other one was a storybook, and it seemed like it was a storybook, if I remember right, is what happened after, like Cinderella, what happened after, you know. And I don't know whatever happened to those books, and I would just love to have been able to keep those two, you know. But toys, no, I don't remember, except the Kit Cans and, you know, those kind of things. And the marbles, playing ball. That's about it.
What's the first present you remember giving, and
Giving?
to whom?
Well, I never had any money, so I never really bought anything for Mom and Dad that I can ever really remember, you know, and it seems sad because I don't really remember Christmases. Except for Christmases, I can remember Mom, my mother was a cook. Oh, she could cook anything, you know. And Christmas Eve, she always cooked a lot of fish. We had shrimp and fulpi, and let's see, what other kind of fish did she cook? Can't remember. It was probably bass or trout or something like that. But and then Christmas Day, Mom would make a roast. But that Christmas Eve was always nice like that. And sometimes we'd go to midnight mass. And that was always nice to come home. And then we'd come home and open up our Christmas gifts. We always opened them up Christmas Eve. But I don't really remember Christmas gifts, you know, per se as a child. I really don't remember. I don't think we were into that as much. It wasn't until later years that I can even remember a Christmas tree. I think all we concentrated on was lots to eat and drink and a good time, but not too much in the way of Christmas toys.
What's the first present you remember receiving?
Like I say, the doll.
The doll?
That's all I can remember, really.
Did you have any favorite stories outside of the book of Cinderella?
No.
Oh, that was
No,
it.
that was it. You know, we used to listen to the radio a lot. In those days, we didn't go to the theater much until I got older. Once in a while, it was a big treat. Mom and Dad would take us kids to the theater, but that wasn't often. But the radio was the big thing. Oh, I loved listening to the radio. There were so many stories. There was, well, here you're going to have to help me remember, Dad. There was Lux Presents Hollywood, and Okay.
The Hermit's Cave.
Yeah.
I Love a Mystery.
Right.
Um,
I was going to write those down because I knew I'd
The
forget.
Lone Ranger.
Right.
Tailspin Tommy.
Right.
The Shadow.
Mm-hmm.
Lux Percent's Hollywood.
Right. All that. We'd look forward to that every evening. Mom would make a bunch of popcorn and we'd sit there, or I'd be darning. I darned socks. That was my thing. I had to
Darned?
darn. You have a hole in your sock, and you
Mhm.
take yarn, and you would mend that
Okay.
to fill up the hole, you know. And Dad had a little round thing of wood
Mm-hmm.
with it was about this long, and you'd fit that on the heel of inside of your sock. Well, like take this for instance. This thing would fit like a fist,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and then you would darn that. And that was my thing, was darning socks. Or we'd iron, you know. And Mom would, or when I was small, Mom would sit and rock me in the rocking chair. She had a wicker rocking chair, and I loved that thing, and it squeaked, you know. And I can remember her holding me as we'd listen to the radio. Okay.
Did you have a secret hiding place?
Did I have a secret hiding place? No, not really. Except to hold a blanket over my head. That was it, you know. That's about it.
Did you have any pets?
I only had that dog that I can remember. In later years, Mom had a couple of little dogs. They looked like little chihuahuas. Trixie. But for me to actually have a pet, no, I never did. That little dog that I got at Christmas time died. In those days they didn't have shots,
Uh-huh.
or if they did, we weren't aware of it, you know. And it didn't last long.
Do you
But I
remember
know,
what his-
and Mom had cats, but they were outdoor cats that
Uh-huh.
came and went, you know. Like what I've got in the backyard. Only they were pets, you know. Not wild ones like mine.
Do you remember the dog's name?
No, not really.
Did you have any favorite relatives?
They were all my favorites. I liked them all. There was no favorite relative, no. I liked them all.
Who do you remember when you were young the most being around?
Well, to be honest, Jason, we used to always be in a group. You know, Mom came from a large family. There was 8 children, 13 altogether, but the others had passed away. But whenever we'd get together, it was with everybody. It wasn't just with one per se. Although Annie, I take that back. Annie came and lived with Mom just for a short time. That's just before she got married. Why, I don't know. I don't remember why. But other than that, we were always together as a group, as a family. We used to go fishing. And in those days, we didn't have fishing rods and reels. We'd all we would pile into Grandpa's truck and go to Port Lock. And Port Lock was all stone and with this river running through. And Carmen would jump out of the truck and he'd run to the trees and cut us all branches.
Mm.
And then we'd get fishing line and tie it on the end, at one end to the pole, you know, or stick or whatever you want to call it, and a hook. And that's the way we fished. It always caught something. We caught everything. We caught pike, perch, bass, and our bass were big. It's not like your little bluegills that you get nowadays, or what you caught when you were little. Do you remember that when you went fishing with us? We were so fortunate that day. We had that pontoon boat, and we took you out fishing your very first time. And all we were catching was, we must have gotten into a school of little bluegills. And gosh, they weren't any bigger than this. But every time you put your pole in there, you'd catch this little fish. You were just so excited, and we were so happy. You know, I mean, of course, we couldn't keep them because they were so small, but they kept biting, and you kept pulling them in. You were so excited. You don't remember that? Not even vaguely, maybe.
Maybe vaguely.
Yeah, yeah.
Did you have a nickname?
No. Mm-mm. Of course, as sweet as my name was, and I was sweet, I should have had something.
Who took care of you if your parents were away?
My grandmother, because she lived upstairs. Grandma and Grandpa Toffley lived upstairs. And Grandma and Grandpa's house burned down. I liked visiting with Grandma and Grandpa. In fact, both grandparents. I liked living with Grandma and Grandpa Toffley, not living, going there to visit. There was a lot of kids to play with there, and I was able to stay out until dark, when the street lights came on, and then of course we had to come in then. But it was a lot of fun, and I'll never forget this girl that lived next door to me. I really liked her. Her name was Anita Lorita Berding. And how I remembered that, I don't know, because I can't even remember anything yesterday. But I remembered her, and of course we used to play together all the time, There was a bunch of other kids that we played with. She got married to an Italian fellow and went back to Italy, and the son of a gun really mistreated her, and she was like a real old-fashioned Italian lady, ending up with the dark clothes and the hat and washing her clothes in the stream, in the river, or whatever you want to call it. She wanted to come home so bad, but she had 2 children, and of course she couldn't take those back over the, and her mother and dad were just so upset, and her sister, and I think she had a brother too.
She couldn't come back? Why not?
Well, because she couldn't take her children. You can't leave the country with your kids like that, And that was sad. She was a nice girl. And he was really nice when he was here. But when he got her over there, boy, he just changed.
Did you have a grown-up friend who wasn't a relative?
I guess Mr. and Mrs. Torini and Doris Torini I used to visit on occasion. I played by myself a lot, but I used to visit with them. In fact, we went camping with Mr. and Mrs. Torini. There was Mr. and Mrs. Torini, Doris, Dad, and I guess that was it, and Ronnie, of course. And I remember one time we went camping, and thank goodness the owner of the camp was a good friend. And he happened to be there this one evening, and what it was is the cabin, it was like 2 cabins. You had one cabin where you sat, and in the sleeping quarters, and then the other area, other little cabin, was where you cooked. And that evening, Dad and I and Mrs. Torini went out, decided to go out for a boat ride, and Doris was there, and he was there talking to Mom, and there was somebody else there too, I don't know who it was, but they were all talking, and we were out in the boat, and all of a sudden we saw a fire, and the camp where we did the cooking had caught fire, and thank goodness the guy was there, because he knew that we weren't even in there. What had happened is, in those days, in fact I've seen them around today, they had a little apparatus about this long that you nailed to the wall, and you had kept your matches in there. And it had like a little lip that came this way, and the matches came down and filled this up. And you used to use your matches because you had to light your stove all the time, And we think that a mouse must have gotten a hold of a match and started the fire that way, chewed the end or something, It's the only thing that we could ever figure out how that fire started. Because it wasn't from the stove, and that's the only thing we could figure out at that time. Thank goodness he was there to know that we weren't being careless or whatever,
What was the first movie you saw?
Oh, wait, let me get back to the camp. It had outdoor privies, of
Oh.
course. And water, we used to go across the road. It was like a flowing faucet type of thing, That's where we used to get our water. And the outdoor privy, Mom had a beautiful nightgown, that had a real full skirt. It fit nice and tight here, but it had a real full skirt. Well, she went out there, and she was gathering her skirt up, and she happened to look inside the privy, and here is a porcupine. Can you imagine what it would have happened if she had sat on that thing? She went come screaming into the cabin to tell Dad. But of course, then that was like that outdoor privy we had when we had that 40 acres. And I guess you wouldn't remember. No, you wouldn't remember. You were too young. Anyway, I went and sat. I always looked inside there to make sure there wasn't any porcupine, but I didn't look this time, and there was a hornet's nest in there. I come flying out of there, bam, 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 3 times that thing got a hold of me. I'm sure adding a little thing here to that, you know. But anyway, she come flying out of there with my pants down around my ankles, yelling. Oh well, add a little excitement to my life, you know.
What was the first movie you saw?
Oh heavens, Jason, I have no idea. All I can remember is going to the theater, and what movie I saw, I can't tell you. But they used to have, what would you call that, a series that they used to come on with, who was that, Daddy? Some of those series that we used to watch. And we
Oh,
used to-
Sergeant Preston.
Yeah, right.
Of the Royal Mounted.
That's it, yeah, that was it. That one I remember. But the others I don't. I can't really remember, because we never really went to the theater that often.
I think Red Ryder had a series too.
Right. Would you mind handing me a tissue, Papa? A tissue? I need that. But, yeah, thanks.
How about television?
I never saw television until I came to Detroit with Dad when I was 21. That's the first television I saw.
Did anybody have television up north?
I'm sure somebody must have, but no one that I knew of,
Mm-mm.
or that we knew. I don't, no, in fact they didn't, did they? Because they didn't have the,
No channels.
no channels, right? No.
Had you heard about it?
Yeah, I heard about it, but, you know, to hear it on the radio, do you really know what you're, you know? I'm sure in the theaters it must have shown advertising, I would think. I really don't know. But the first time I saw it was when we went up to into Detroit, or down to Detroit, to meet your grandma and grandpa Huntley, and Ronnie with us. Of course, he was only 10, 11. He was 11 at that time. Couldn't get him away from that television. He enjoyed it so much. You know, he just sat there and he was glued to it.
What indoor games did you play?
Checkers, Chinese checkers, Monopoly, cards. That was it.
What outdoor games did you play?
Like I told you, ball and the cans. That was it. Hide and go seek. Oh, what? Do you remember what that was called, Dad? What was it that we used to chant for hide and go seek? Do you remember that? We had like a chant that we used to say.
Oh, no,
It just came to me now, but I can't remember what it was. Anyway,
maybe that was girl stuff.
maybe.
Maybe. Is there one special memory you have, an early memory you have with your mother?
The rocking chair, her cooking. She loved to play Chinese checkers. I can remember coming home from school one day for lunch, and we were playing Chinese checkers before I went. She kept saying, "One more game." And I'd say, "Ma, I gotta get to school. One more game." Those are the memories I had of her. She was a good mom. We never played games together other than that, you know, like outdoor games or with Dad. We more or less were on our own, you know. But I didn't miss anything. I felt I was loved, and that was all that was necessary, you know. But we never did things together per se. we went to the restaurant on an occasional, not like what we do here. To go to the restaurant then was a treat. And you didn't talk when you went into a restaurant. You just sat, and if you talked in whispers. You weren't gregarious, that, oh, like I am now, yelling and hollering. I can't talk low anyway, you knew that. But we had special restaurants. One restaurant we went to where you got your Italian dinner, and another restaurant for fish. And foot-long hot dogs. Every once in a while, Dad would take us out for a foot-long hot dog. That was I never tasted anything so good.
How often would you go out to dinner?
I don't know, about maybe once every 3-4 months, maybe.
Once every 3-4 months.
Yeah, every 3 or 4 months, maybe we'd go out to dinner. But it wasn't often.
Is there one special early memory you have of your father?
Dad liked to hunt, and Mom would pack a lunch, and we would all go out hunting for like rabbits or pheasants. That's what I can remember with Dad. He liked hunting, and he hated fishing, and Mom loved to fish, as we know. He would take her out in the boat, or well, we didn't have a boat at that particular time. Later, I bought Dad a boat from, the people that I was telling you about that had the camp. He had a Petersboro boat, a wooden boat. And Dad was I was working at the time, doing hairdressing. And he come home and he says, oh, he's got that boat, I'd love that boat. And before you know it, I bought it for him. He was so excited. But anyway, Dad was a good dad. Mom could wake him up at any time of the day or night. Dad worked shift work. And one week it would be 7 to 3, and the next week 3 to 11, and the next week it'd be 11 to 7. And I don't know to this day how he was able to adapt his sleeping, because, shift work like that. Every week it'd be something, shift.
What kind of shift? Where did he work?
He worked at the steel plant, Algoma Steel Plant, and he was a crane operator. And I'm sure you have seen in pictures with an overhead crane, and he would pick up these hot ingots. These doors would open up, and you'd have your hot ingots down there, and he would be right over this, and this pick up the ingots like this.
What's an ingot?
How would you explain an ingot, Dad? Big piece of steel.
A form of steel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A form of steel.
Could be any size.
Yeah. And he would pick that up and move it to wherever there would, and they would cut it or whatever they did with it, lay it on a slab and take it and roll it along and cut it to whatever they were needing it for.
Is that the only job he had, was a crane operator?
Yeah, that was it. Before that, he was, don't forget, that was the time of Depression before that. When they first got married, I can remember he worked in a grocery store and selling popcorn on the front of the store. Then of course, he worked with Grandpa, and they worked on the railroad at that time. And poor Dad, the mosquitoes and black flies are horrible in Canada. His ears got so big and swollen from bites that they actually drip water, and Dad was a very polite man, and he said they used to, at feeding time, lots to eat though. They would put like dozens of eggs at a time on the table, and the same with all kinds of meat. And Dad would say, well, would you pass me this, and would you pass me that? By the time it got to him, he never ended up with anything, It was, rough.
So, at the steel plant, did he ever have to, they melt down steel, Was he ever around anything like that?
Well, I really don't think so, Jay. I really don't know. I imagine he must have seen them pour.
He,
They had to pour something
from
in
what
order
I
to form an
understood,
ingot.
he was on a crane, but the crane was only 8 feet from the molten steel. So it was super hot in this
Well,
keg.
it had to be hot more than 8
He
feet.
had an air conditioner and
No. Oh, yeah, but
Didn't
the air
do anything.
conditioner didn't come until later years. Remember, he said that until later years. And Dad always wore long underwear under his and heavy pants. It insulated his body from the heat.
So it insulated the body?
Yeah.
From the heat?
Yeah, from the heat, because he had no air conditioning. He said it was always over 100 degrees in that. I don't know. And they only worked like half hour on and half hour off because the heat was intolerable, you know, after a while, because it was over 100 degrees. You can't be working over that tremendous heat like that for any length of time, you know.
Did he have an accent?
No, because he came over from Italy when he was 9. And Achille, his brother Achille, was 7. And so he didn't have any accent. He liked school. He was a smart man. I think if Dad had was able to have gone on to college, he really would have done well, because he was a smart man. He read a lot. I can remember him reading to Mom and Dad, Mom and I, and Ronnie when I was small. But he was always into these mystery magazines, you know. Maybe that's why I like mysteries. All that gore. You know?
What about Grandma? What did she do?
Grandma didn't read. She just listened to the radio, you know. And of course she was a hairdresser. And then Dad, when she was single, she became a hairdresser. She was very good. Mom was one of these type of hairdressers that every little hair had to be in place, you know. She was a good hairdresser. And she taught her sister Annie hairdressing, and the two of them worked at this post office. Grandpa had bought that post office and converted it into apartments. And they had the 2 rooms, the waiting room and the big room where the beauty parlor was in. And I had the same 2 rooms when I had my beauty parlor, because Grandma and Grandpa still had the post office. And then they had the main floor for Grandma and Grandpa, because they had the large rooms. They had from beauty parlor. When you walked in that door, there was the big vestibule, and off of that was Mama's beauty parlor, and then to the right-hand side there was the door that led into a hall that had the stairways up to the upstairs apartments or to the ones down the basement. They had a couple apartments down the basements also. And then if you went straight through, then you walked into this little another vestibule where they hung their coats on both sides. And then there was a great big huge room that was more like a dining room. And to the right of that was the kitchen, and to the left of the kitchen was a big bedroom with another little alcove off of it that was like a closet. And then it ended up being great-grandma's bedroom. But it was just like a bed. It wasn't big enough for anything else like a bed, but a little chest of drawers. And then coming back to that main center room, where it had a bedroom off of it, which was the boys' bedroom. And then to the right of it, the left of it, there was another big huge room, which was the sitting room. And then there was another bedroom, the girls' bedroom, off of that. And off of the sitting room there was another doorway that led into a little veranda porch type of thing, and then outdoors. And the steps on both entrances, being that it was the post office, the steps were as long as this, maybe even a little longer than that. But I have to tell you the story about Mama, about the bedroom, and Mama when she was dating my dad. Or do you want me to get into that right
Go
now?
ahead. Go
Okay.
ahead.
At that particular time, Grandma and Grandpa were quite strict, and whenever Dad would come to visit, and if he wanted to take Mom to the theater, he had to take one or two of the kids along with him. They were never allowed to go on a date by themselves.
This is your mother and father
My
weren't
mother and
allowed
dad.
to
Yeah.
date
Right.
without some
Without
kids
one of the
along.
kids, right. So they always had to take one of the kids. So they were never allowed, and then they had to come right home, or, you know, whatever, because they always had the kids with them anyway. So they never really had a chance to smooch very much. So Dad would stay until, the buses only ran until 12 o'clock at night. No, it wasn't even 11 o'clock at night, buses ran. But anyway, so Dad would wait until Grandma and Grandpa would go to sleep. And then he would court Mom through their bedroom window. And it must have been quite a thing to see, because those post office windows were really high up off the ground, you know. In fact, you've got some pictures of Mom and Dad and standing in front of the sign saying Stilton Beauty Parlor, and you'll see how high the windows are. Well, he used to make a running leap to jump up onto the windowsills. Well, in the bedroom, of course, all the girls were in the bedroom at the same, because there was four beds in there, and the windowsills were about that wide on the inside, and on the outside they were wider. So anyway, he used to court her through the bedroom window, you know. Well, one time a policeman come by, and he says, "Oh, for heaven's sakes, Ange, don't duck, because they'll be thinking I'm breaking in." So there's Mom and Dad, you know, with a big flashlight on them. And so it was about a week later or something, Mom went to the drugstore, and the cop happened to be in there. Of course, she didn't know him because he's behind the flashlight and in the dark, you know. And he turns to her and he says, he says, "That's a new way to make love." To court, I beg your pardon, it was to court. That's a new way of courting, that was it. I had to get that little bit in. And then I'll have to tell you when Mom and Dad got married, how she ran away and got married.
Go ahead.
You want it this time? Okay. Mama and Dad were two different kinds of Italian. Dad was Bruzzese Italian from the northern part of Italy. That's why the blondes and the blue eyes. And Mom was more, Dad was Fudlani from the northern part of Italy, and Mama was a Bruzzese, more towards the middle part, but she was also blonde and blue-eyed. But anyway, Grandma Toffley didn't want my dad to marry Mom, because that was a different Italian. So, and plus I think she was a little bit jealous of Mom, because Mom was a good-looking woman. And I think she was just a little bit jealous of Mom to take away her son, you know. So she goes to Grandma Acavati, and she raised a rumpus saying that she didn't want her son to marry Mama. So then naturally Grandma Acavati and Grandpa Acavati says, well, if her son is too good for you, then you're too good for him. Although they liked Dad, you know, they really did. And but anyway, so they decided to run away and get married. So Mom took her wedding dress and hid it in her uniform, because she wore a white dress. It looked like a nurse's dress, you know, white dress. Anyway, so she hid this in her white uniform, and she went to the drugstore and left it there. And
she left it just...
the dress, well, it was in a bag, and she told the druggist, she knew them all over at the drugstore, and she says, "Here's this is my package." She says, "Would you hold it for me?" And so they put it behind the counter, you know, and kept it for her. So she and Dad had decided when to get married, you know, and so they were going to run away and get married and all that. So that day, she hadn't been allowed to see Mama or Dad, you know. So this one day she said to Grandma and Grandpa, she said, "Well, I've had it." She says, "I am not staying in anymore." She says, "I'm going out." So Grandma says, "You're not going to see Hugo, are you?" And she said, "No, I'm not." So they said to Dominic, "Follow Ange. I don't want her to see Dominic or see Hugo." And Dominic says, no, I'm not going to. So Grandpa decided to follow Mom, because he did not want her to see it. So he followed her because walking, because he knew Dad didn't have a car. And so to this day, John Street, the end of John Street, there was a hill to the main road, you know, and it went over a railroad track. And on the other side of the railroad track was Dad was waiting with his friend with a car. Meanwhile, Grandpa's following Mama, and he says, she run like a son of a bugger, jump in the car and away she go. Well, you know, that was it. You know, he goes running home, gets the car, but by that time, Mom and Dad had already taken off. They got married, and then they went to see her grandmother and grandpa, which would be Grandma's mother and dad, and showed them the marriage license.
So it would be your
Great-grandma.
great-grandma.
Great-grandma and grandpa, yeah. Mamuchin Tatil.
On whose side?
Manzo.
Manzo.
Yeah, Mamuchin Tatil Manzo.
On, so that is,
My mother's side and her mother's side. Okay? Yeah. And so Grandpa goes to their house. Grandpa Acavati goes to Grandma and Grandpa Manzo's house and told them about Ange running away with Hugo. And they proceeded to tell him that they saw the marriage license and that they got married. You know. Well, anyway, they became friends, and they moved into an apartment in the post office.
who
And
became friends?
I'm sorry.
Who became friends?
Well, Mama and Dad became friends with Grandma and Grandpa Acavati, you know. So they moved into this apartment. And this apartment was between the two floors. It was 2 rooms. It was a kitchen and a bedroom. Small rooms. Each room wasn't any bigger than the dining room there. Which would you say what?
10 by 10.
Not very big anyway.
10 by 10?
Yeah, if that, real small. And it had a little bathroom. And it had an attic between the floors. I can remember that to this day. It was, because I'd seen them afterwards. Anyway, they had that, and that's where I was born, in that apartment. And, okay, ask me some more questions. But let me get a drink of water.
Okay.
I'm really jabbing here.
No, that's
a lot of
fine.
memories.
What grammar school did you go to? Where was it?
David Kyle School, and that was in Buckley. I walked there, and it was like, it would be like from here to Parshallville, maybe even a little bit further.
So now where was Buckley in relation to Sault Ste. Marie?
How could I explain that, Dad? It was in Sault Ste. Marie. Buckley would be
Buckley would be,
just the name of the area of the Sioux. Okay, there was a lot
right
of
by the
nationality.
steel plant, right?
Yeah. Well,
Right
yeah.
by the steel plant?
Yeah,
Mhm.
not too far away from it. But you must remember, the Sioux was a lot of different nationalities. Okay. Buckley was a little bit of Italian, a little bit of English, and then they had, would you say west of that would be, were all the Polish people. I had it on the tip of my tongue. I don't know, but every little, and then the West End was really all the Italian people, the West End, you know. It was all centered, different, you know. And then, of course, if you went east, where like Ronnie lives now and Grandma and Grandpa Toffley lived, that was all the English. And that was the rich people, and we were all the European, the Italians, and the, you know, all the Dagos per se, and all the Polacks, and the, you know.
So the English were the white collar neighborhoods.
That's
the
right.
Italians were the blue collar neighborhoods.
Right,
and-
exactly.
Okay.
But, oh, and I gotta tell you, when I used to go to visit Grandma and Grandpa, oh, I did tell you about it. It's such a good time. I really had a good time with all the kids playing at night. Okay.
So, grammar school. Did you have any favorite teachers?
Mrs. Dunlop, she was a really nice teacher. I really liked her. she invited all the kids over to her house, and I wasn't able to go. And those stinkers. She had a wood stove, and the dumb kids knocked over the stove, and the black chimney soot all over the place. I'll never forget them telling me about that. I felt so sorry for
Oh,
her.
they did it intentionally?
I'm more inclined to think the kids got a little rambunctious and did that. She was a really nice teacher, and she was single. And I can remember Miss Carter. I knew her before she became a teacher, and she told her dad, "I don't want to become a teacher because teachers never get married." And most of the teachers there were all single. You know, all, as they called it, old maids, per se, you know.
How old was an old maid?
I don't know, but you just never got married. You were always an old maid, you know. And then Mr. Upper, the principal. I was forever having a note sent home every year. You know, Carmel does too much talking in school, naturally. But I can remember, here, our public school went from kindergarten to grade 8. Mm-hmm. We didn't have an intermediate school at all. And I can remember getting a strap from Mr. Upper in grade 8, putting both hands out and smacking my hands with a ruler. I can remember that. Talk too much.
Did that happen a lot?
No, I only can remember that one time. You know, he was a that Mr. Upper, honestly, he was a real principal type of thing. He was a little short, skinny little thing, you know, very prim. He used to have a pinstripe suit, and his shoes were like high top shoes, you know, with the shoes that lace around, like they don't race through the whole, you know. Anyway, he said to me, the first day of school, you had to tell your name, you know, like you do today. And I said, Carmel Toffley. Oh, he said, what's your father's name? And I said, Hugo Toffley. He says, did he have a brother? And I said, yes. I said, Achille Toffley. Oh, he says, I remember him. So when Achille and Helen came down from Sudbury, they lived in Sudbury. So when they came down to visit, and I told him, I said, oh, my teacher, Mr. Upper, knows you. Ah, he says, I know, because they used to throw snowballs at him, knocking his hat off. And I think he was the teacher that they held upside down out the window. So, that's why Mr. Upper remembered Achille. You know?
Okay.
Okay.
So Achille was a bit rambunctious.
Yes, he was. I loved Achille. Now, you asked me before about who I liked. Achille and Helen were jewels. I love those two. In fact, I used to take the train. Mom would put me on the train and to go to Sudbury to visit with them. They were really down-to-earth people. And Achille, he could tell one joke right after the other. He was neat. He was really a nice guy. He had 3 boys. He had Donnie, who became, well, I'll tell you their story. He had Donnie, Bobby, and Helen wasn't able to have children anymore after that. And they adopted Sandra. And then it was shortly after that, she had Jean, which came as a complete surprise because she had to have her tubes tied because she wasn't well. And that's why they adopted Sandra. And then after that, they had Jean. Well, Donnie became a motorcycle cop in Toronto. Bobby became a cop in Sudbury and Lively. He changed both places. Jean became a cop in Toronto, and then he changed to, I guess it was Sudbury. But he was an undercover cop, the beard, into narcotics. Then Bobby's son, David, also became a cop. But didn't they say he had something to do with, what was it? Let me think, trying to think. He wasn't, was it with narcotics or undercover? I can't quite remember. But anyway, he's still a cop. And then Sandra, her son, also became into the police force, but he also went into a different branch. I don't remember exactly what it was. Anyway, come on, hurry up, Jason, and ask me some more questions. Let's see, what else can I think about Achille? Oh, Achille worked in the mines. The nickel mines, as they called it, Sudbury nickel mines. And there was an accident in there, and he had his foot crushed. I was just telling him about Achille having his foot crushed in the nickel mines. Mm-hmm. And he was in the hospital for 2.5 years. And when they first brought him out, they had to put him not in a bed, but on a board, laying on a board, because he was so badly banged up. And for years, that one foot of his gave him a lot of problems. And that's where he met Helen. She was a nurse there in that Sudbury hospital. And then Bobby, and the thing that was so bad is because, like I said, Keeley was in the mines when he had that accident. It took a while to get him out of the mines, and that, wasn't pleasant. And then his son Bobby, when he was the policeman, everybody liked Bobby. And this young rookie cop, they asked him, who do you want to ride with today? It was just his first or second week in being a rookie cop. And he said, I want to go with Bobby. Well, Sudbury is nothing but hills, okay, and rock on both sides, or cliffs, or whatever, And they were going around this hill, and on this side there was nothing, and this rock's like a slab of rock on this side. And around comes this truck, and this truck brakes, at least that's what they're assuming happened, and he was carrying a load of steel, and this load of steel dumped on top of the police car, killing their young rookie and crushing Bobby. And this happened about 3 or 4 days before Sandra's wedding. He was in the hospital, for a long, long time, and it took a long time to get him out from underneath all this slab of steel. And for Keeley, this was really devastating, because he knew what it was like to be crushed and to be waiting for them to pull you out of all this, It was a real devastating type of thing. And then especially with the wedding only being 3 or 4 days away. He got through it all right, but he always walked with a cane. His face was all scarred up. And he had just been married, for about a year? Wasn't that all, Daddy?
Yeah.
He'd only been married for about a year. Good-looking gal. She later divorced him. I think she stayed with him for about, 5 years? Mm-hmm. They had one child, and then she left him. She'd gone to work for a doctor, and then, anyway. So it was Sandra, the day that Sandra was supposed to get married, they got a phone call from the hospital. They didn't expect Bobby to live. And Helen, I had taken the message for Helen, and I went to her and I told her, Helen, they want you at the hospital right away. I never saw a woman that was able to pull herself together. She just took one deep breath and pulled herself together and went and got Achille, and they went to the hospital. Well, they were there for I don't know how long, and I can remember Sandra her hair was all done up, and I can remember her pulling everything off, She was anyway, then they came back and the wedding proceeded and went through with the whole thing. with the meal and the whole thing, and then they went back to the hospital. And he pulled through it okay. But like I said, he walked, to this day he still walks with a cane, and he was pretty banged up.
Now, again, how was everyone related here?
Okay, Akile and Helen, Akile is Dad's brother, okay?
Okay.
Akile
All right,
Toffley.
and that's okay.
Yeah, and then of course all the boys became
Sure.
the policemen.
Now, back in school,
Yeah.
grammar school,
Okay.
what was your favorite subject?
I didn't have,
You did.
but I like school. School didn't like me, but I liked school. And I had a good time in school, a lot of fun. And I liked school. I liked my teachers. I liked the kids. It was a fun time. Not a smart time, but a fun time.
Okay.
Okay?
What were you in any plays or concerts or
No.
anything like that?
I did take up the violin. I don't know why. I thought that was the most boring instrument in the whole world. I don't know why I took the violin. I think I would have preferred a trumpet or something like that, you know. But I just had a few lessons with that violin. Ronnie still got my violin.
Now, what did you do after school?
Well, after school, then I decided we had the technical school, Sioux Technical School. Now that you went to if you were going in for business, typing, bookkeeping and everything. Well, I wanted to become a nurse. So then I went to the Sioux Collegiate, and there they taught the Latin and whatever. And I only went to school I finished grade 10, and then I decided to go to work. Pardon me, we didn't have a lot of money. We had a lot to eat. We had clothes, not a lot of clothes, but just what was necessary, you know. And I never was on an allowance, just whenever I needed money. Well, I never asked for money because I knew Mom and Dad didn't have a lot of money, you know. So Mom wouldn't let me babysit. She didn't want me to have that responsibility in case something would happen, you know. So I decided to go. In fact, all my girlfriends. No, Elena, she went on. She completed technical school. But Mary Lou and Evio and Reno, Tony, we all quit school. Tony was a little bit older, and Evio was a little older, and so was Reno. But we all quit. We all went to work. They went to work in the steel plant. Reno worked at a bakery, delivering. And then I went into hairdressing, because I thought, what better profession could I be? I could be my own boss, get married, and still do hairdressing in the basement per se, and bring in money that way, and still be home to cook and take care of the family. And I advertised on the radio, and I had a nice advertisement in the Yellow Pages. And I did hairdressing for a couple of years. I remember painting the beauty parlor. I painted the walls white and the windows a real pretty shade of pink. And I had a great big fern, lots of plants. And then I went to a fortune teller. And this Mrs. Campana, she was my customer too. And I went to Mrs. Campana, and first one I ever went to. And I said, she said, Carmel, she said, I see you're going to get married within a year's time. She says, you're going to meet a man in uniform. And I thought, uniform, okay, mailman, bus driver, you know, policeman. And she said, you're going to meet a man in uniform. She says, you're going to get married within a year's time. She says, I see the figure 3. We thought, well, 3 children. Well, sure enough, Daddy. I met Dad in November and got married in April. A uniform, Air Force. 3. 3 beds. Look at Dad. Did you see Dad? Do it, Dad. Do it.
Okay.
So anyway, and the figure 3, Dad, Jason, and me. There's your figure 3. I never went to a fortune teller since, you know. And sure enough, within a year's time.
So, getting back to grammar school.
Well, before we do, I think I'm going to have to leave for a few minutes, okay?
Okay. Back to grammar school for a second.
Okay.
When after school, what would you do? Would you go straight home? Would you go visit friends? What would you do?
No, I was always supposed to come right home. Except unless I played ball.
Mm-hmm.
If I joined the team to play ball, then I was allowed to stay and play ball. Otherwise, I had to go right home. So I never really went to any friends' home after school. No.
How far was the school from your home?
Oh, but like from here to the cemetery, not that far. So
3
how far would that
miles?
be, Daddy? How far
Mile.
would you say?
Roughly a
Oh,
mile.
oh yeah, over a mile. And we walked it all the time. No buses or anything that would take us to school or
Did you
anything
have
like that.
buses?
Oh yeah, we had buses. No school buses. We used to have to go to high school, which was in the middle of town, which was about 10 miles. Hey, Daddy, would you say from Buckley? At least 10 miles. We used to just take the regular bus. It wasn't a school bus. You take the regular bus
Okay.
and get to school that way. I even took the bicycle on occasion
Mhm.
if I missed the bus. For high school, for public school, we walked all the time. I remember one thing about going there. I was in kindergarten, and there was a gas station right at the corner, and between the sidewalk and the gas station, it was about this wide, and there was nothing but dirt, you know. And I started playing in it. I don't know why I did that, because, you know,
How old were you?
well, in kindergarten.
Okay.
And I got to school, and it was time to come home, you know. I'll never forget that. The teacher says, "Where were you?" She saw me dirty, you know.
Terrific.
Okay, friends you asked. Okay, no, I didn't. After school, I had to go home.
Mm-hmm.
I played ball. I belonged to the baseball team.
Okay.
Then I joined. Well, Mom put me in for swimming lessons. I did that. Friends, I'd stay at Shirley Stairs' house. I used to sleep at her house every now and then. Played cards, like I said, with Mary Lou and her brothers and Tony. That was about it. Then there was Mr. and Mrs. Candido. They were, I forget exactly how they were related to Grandma. But,
Weren't they cousins?
yeah, they're cousins, but I don't know how.
Hmm.
But anyway, doesn't matter. With Dino and Rita. And we used to go on picnics I used to go on picnics with them. And we used to have a real good time with Grandma and Grandpa and Mr. and Mrs. Candido and myself. Let's see. And I can remember down the West End when Grandpa were still living down the West End. This is Grandma and Grandpa Toffley. They used to come up with a big truck, and everybody'd get on the truck, and we'd go blueberry picking. And in those days, you know, fruit you'd have to buy, and they did not have a lot of money. Grandma and Grandpa Toffley, they did not have a lot of money at all. In fact, Dad said that they went hungry many, many times when they were kids because they didn't have very much to eat. And but anyway, we used to go blueberry picking
Okay.
like that. Grandma and Grandpa Acavati, I used to go over there and stay overnight. And Oh, I used to wake up in the morning to the smell of meat cooking. They would cook meat and eggs for breakfast in the morning because they had all these kids and they were all grown, most of them, by that time. It was the best smells in that house. They had the farm, and I can remember going out in the back, helping them tie up. Well, how can a kid tie up? But I used to help them tie up carrots to go to the farmer's market. Grandpa was very business oriented because now Grandpa couldn't read or write.
Now
Okay.
this is Grandpa.
Acavati. Okay, Grandpa.
Grandpa
Acavati.
Acavati, whose name was
Caesar.
Caesar. Okay.
Yeah, this was Grandpa Caesar Acavati and Carmel Acavati. Okay. Grandpa could not read or write, but he had a good business mind, and he bought the post office, and he knew the right people. There was a bid in for the post office, and he knew just the right person to say, and he was talking, and he says, "Oh, so what was the bid on the post office?" Well, it was the last day that you could get a bid in, and it had to go to Toronto, the bid to buy the post office. So he was friends with everybody, and he said, "So what was the bid on the post office?" And the guy told him, because he says, "How's he going to get mail to there?" Smart. He sent a telegram, and he underbid, so he was able to buy the post office. Clever. So he had the post office, and he bought a drugstore, and the druggist stole him blind, because he'd say, "Caesar, sign this check, I had to pay for drugs or whatever," and Grandpa would. He could sign his name, but that was all. And he also had the franchise on chocolates. He was the only one that sold this particular chocolates and everything. And so he sold the drugstore after he found out that the druggist was stealing him blind, And then he had the sewer and contracting business, putting in sewers and everything. That's what he started out with. And then he took the 40-acre farm. And at that time, the war was over, and we had
Which war?
Army barracks. That would be what would war that would
Second
be?
World
Second World War.
So this is around the late 40s.
Yeah, right. And so he bought the army barracks. He bought 3 army barracks, divided them into apartments, and moved them onto the farm.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, he put in the sewers and water and stuff like that. So he was very smart. He didn't let any grass grow under his feet.
You might add his sewer contracting business ended up as a multi-million-dollar.
Oh yeah. It was he made money, and then he built a big house right there on the hill, all stone. It was a nice house. A lot of rooms, a lot of bathrooms.
This was in the Sioux.
Everything is in the Sioux.
What happened to the house?
Well, they tore after after Grandpa passed away. Grandma moved in with Annie, and the church bought the house, and they tore it down, and they kept most of the stone for around the fence and stuff, and they built a church. Catholic church is there. And right next door to it, Mom and Dad bought a lot and built their home, and that was on Carmel Road.
Was the land donated to the church or purchased by the church?
It was purchased. Yeah, it was purchased.
The farm ended up as a subdivision.
Yeah, the farm ended up as a subdivision, and that's where the roads came in. Carmel Road, Caesar Road, Nicholas Boulevard, and Angela Road.
Okay.
Right.
What chores did you have?
Which what?
Chores. Did you have some chores?
Oh, yeah. I ironed, washed the kitchen floor, darned socks. Whatever Mom wanted me to do, I did. I had a lot of...
Did
lot
you
of
get
things.
paid?
No. That was...
You just did
part
what
of-
you needed to keep the family
Yeah,
going.
right. Just helped out. I mean, after all, I'm family, they're family, you just do what you had to do.
How late did you stay up during school nights?
There was never really a specific time set. It was just Mom would say time to go to bed, and he went to bed. you know, but then what they didn't know is I was listening to the radio while they were, you know, and shivering listening to Inter Sanctum Mysteries, you know, and the squeaking door. God, talk about spooky. until I got older, and then I slept upstairs at Grandma and Grandpa Toffley's. You know, remember I told you that I slept up there, and she'd have that coffee waiting for me.
How did you remember anything about summer vacations? Did you have any?
No, the only vacation I can remember was, well, the vacations we ever took would be at that camp, and I can only remember going there maybe twice. And we did go to Boston to visit Grandpa Acabati's brother. He had a brother. He also was a businessman. I don't recall what kind of business he was in now. I was, 14 at the time, and Ronnie was only 4. But he had a huge house. He had 2 girls, and I don't know how many boys he had. And then on occasion we used to come here to Detroit to visit another uncle. And there was Milo. There was about 5 boys. And one of them, Nick, had a grocery store, a small grocery store, you know, family oriented. Really a nice man. And, but Milo and another one of them, I think were doing something they shouldn't have, because I remember one time we were sitting down, Mom had just finished cooking shrimp. I remember that to this day. She was cooking shrimp, and all of a sudden, in comes Milo with his wife and his wife's sister and 2 big suitcases just like that. Here we are, you know. And he pulled Dad aside. Evidently, somebody was after him for something or other, and he wanted to get his wife out of the way, you know, so nothing had happened to her. And I think he was into some really shady stuff. But there was 5 boys.
Earning the stereotypical Italian.
Right, exactly. You know, and one of the boys owned, I don't know whether it was a florist place or what, but the Madonna that I have out there, he gave her this. He liked Mom, this one particular young fellow. He really thought Mom was really nice, and he owned this particular store, and he carried like the Madonna and, you know, all that kind of stuff.
This was while you were younger.
Yes. This was between, let's see, how old was I at the time? I don't know. I lived in that house until we were, let's see, what was I? 17, 18 years old. And then Dad built a home on Trunk Road on the farm where Grandma and Grandpa's farm was. He did most of the building himself. He had a carpenter help him, and the 2 of them built this home. Big, huge house. Holy Toledo. You walked in the front door, and it was a big vestibule. You turned right, you opened the French doors, and you went into the front room with the fireplace. Or you continued down the vestibule, and you turned left, and they had 3 big bedrooms and a bathroom. Or go into the kitchen, and the kitchen was as long as this front room, which would be, 24 by, 15, I guess. And then off of that kitchen was a sunroom. And I bought Mom and Dad a couch for that sunroom. Actually, it was two pieces and a chair. The couch could be put together to be a big couch,
right,
or it could be like a 2 love-size couches. I bought her that, in the footstool and that table behind you. I got him that.
So, going back to grammar school for a second.
Oh yeah, okay.
Do you remember anything about your school buildings?
Yeah, it was 2 stories. Lots of stairs, big stairs, wide stairs. Because don't forget they had from kindergarten all the way to grade 8. And I just talked to Ronnie about that, and he told me that they tore it down. And they did have a reunion, and I didn't know about it, and I would have loved to have gone to that. was that? Big yard. Oh, I'll never forget. They had two great big humongous trees outside that school, right close to the building. Beautiful trees that we used to sit underneath, and they came along and cut them down. I'm telling you, all us kids, we were just hysterical. We were all saying, if we had known, we would have stood around that tree. Well, of course, at that age,
Yeah.
we would have stood around the tree and stopped them from cutting down that trees. And
So now, high school you said was in the middle of town, right?
yes.
What do you remember about high school? What was your favorite teacher in high school?
The one that taught me Latin, but I couldn't tell you what his name was. He had traveled all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
He had more stories to tell us. I loved Latin, only because of the teacher. I didn't like Latin itself, but he could really tell stories, and I mean, he had so many things to tell us about. And then there was Mr. Tipton. He told us history, and he was also the football coach, big tall guy.
What teachers didn't you like? What do you remember
None
about?
really that I can recall, except Mr. Upper. And I can't say I really didn't like him. He was just different.
Upper was in grammar school or in high
grammar
school?
school.
Oh, grammar
school.
school.
Yeah.
Okay. And what was your favorite high school subject? Just Latin? Because of the teacher, or was
Because
there
of the
anything
teacher,
else?
I didn't have any favorite subjects.
You didn't have any.
No.
Okay.
Uh-uh.
What was there any particular subject that you didn't like?
Latin and history, I didn't really care for.
Okay.
I take that back. I liked history. Okay.
Now, who were your closest friends in high school?
None. They all were.
Oh, they all were.
They all were.
How many people did you graduate with? Do you remember?
Well, I didn't graduate because I quit after grade 10.
How many people were in your class? Your school,
Oh,
maybe?
I don't really recall. Probably about 30, I would think. I don't really recall. I can remember some of the kids. I remember John, a great big heavy-set fellow. We had an Indian boy came in there from the reservation. He didn't look Indian. Williams was his name. How could I remember that? Can I? Let's see. I can't really recall. I remember John, he wanted to go become a doctor, and he was so worried. He says, I'm so big, my hands are so thick. He said, what if I had to operate on somebody with a small little waist like yours? What would I do? I said, John, don't worry about it. You're using instruments. You're not using your fingers. You know?
And did you have any favorite sports at that time?
No. Mm-mm. No.
Did you belong to any clubs in
No.
high school?
No. I had to go home.
You had to go home.
I had to go home.
And is that when you were working at the beauty parlor? Did you
No.
have a job at that time,
No,
high
no.
school?
After school. After
Okay.
school.
What did you do when you'd get home from high school?
Just help Mom,
Okay.
you know. And then there was Ronnie to help Ronnie, take care of Ronnie, you know.
Is there anyone you envied in school?
Not really.
No?
No. We were all the same. Everybody was poor. Not poor, I take that back. But we were all the same.
Mhm.
You know, and we never really seemed to I felt sorry for the Indian boy
Why is that?
because everybody says, "Oh, Indian." You know, Indians over there were looked down on, you know. And he didn't look Indian. He looked like us, you know. Only but because he'd come from the reservation, and then he was sent to. It seems to me that when you came from the reservation, they had a special school or a special dormitory type of place where they put these children, you know. But that's it. I forgot the question you asked. What did you ask? I got sidetracked.
It's not important.
Okay.
Well, was there something that you wanted to do in high school that you never had a chance to do?
I don't think so. It seems to me in the back of my mind there was something, but I don't really recall. Probably would have liked to have just been able to stay, and I know, I never saw a football game. I would have liked to have stayed and seen a football game, you know? And I did finally, after I got out of school, I had a chance. No, I remember I was still in school. And I did get a chance to go to the football game. And I was late. Game was over with, so I never did see a football game. You know?
Did you ever date?
No, not in high school. Never dated.
Were you not allowed?
No, I just didn't want to. I never saw anybody that I really wanted to. Besides, nobody asked me, come to think of it, and we didn't date in those days. That, you know, really.
Did you have any friends during high school that influenced you the most?
No. No. I
Ever
never
argue
had.
with anyone during high school, or
Did I what?
ever argue with anyone during high
No.
school? Or?
No. Mm-mm.
So
We
you-
never had time to. It seemed like we just went from one class to the other, and you know, if you don't see anybody after school, how can you form an attachment?
Mhm.
You know, you just didn't.
How about books during high school? What did you read about then? Is there
I
anything?
don't recall.
Any favorites?
Mm-mm. I don't recall.
Movies?
No, don't recall. Not until I got out of high school, but that's, you know.
Mhm. Were there any popular songs during high school you remember?
Nope,
No. What
because
was?
we didn't have tape recorders. We didn't, you know, all that stuff. We didn't have a record player. Grandma and Grandpa had a record player. Academy had a record player because the girls, you know, at my aunts, but no. Mm-mm.
When's the first time you owned a record player? Or had one in the house that you were in?
We never did. We never did. We had the radio. We never had a record player.
Were there? What did everyone wear?
Oh, well, we were really stylish. So we thought. Until you look at some of the pictures, you know. Skirts, sweaters, blouses,
Were
bobby socks. Never wore jeans. Never wore, not at school anyway, maybe at home. Slacks. Never went to school with slacks. We just didn't do that. And if you see some of the old pictures of teenagers going to high school and stuff, if you look back and really think about it, all you saw was skirts and blouses and bobby socks and, you know, the boys in shirts and dress pants per se.
Mhm.
That's the way we dressed. Never thought anything about it.
Remember any particular slang or phrases or terms that you used then?
I can't recall. Can you, Dad? I can't really.
I wasn't around you.
No, but I mean, it's something that you might have used that might have recalled something. I don't really recall anything, Jason.
Do you remember ever owning a car?
No, I was. Let's see, how old was I before Dad bought his first car? I think I was 18.
Did you ever get to drive?
16 or 18. He did teach me. Dad taught me, and in my letter that I had started, I said I went to school to learn how to drive, plus Dad. But no, I don't recall at the school ever having a lesson there. It was Dad taught me how to drive.
And you were
And
how
then-
old?
I'm sorry.
How old?
I must have been 17 before Dad bought that car. Do you remember what year that was,
Yeah,
Daddy?
1949.
In 1949. So how old was I? How old would I be? 32 and 49? What? 17. 17.
What kind
And-
of car was it, Junior?
What was it, Daddy? Do you remember?
Mercury.
Mercury.
4-door green Mercury.
See, I don't remember, but that's what he taught me.
105 horsepower.
Don't remember anything.
And you got to drive it?
I never by myself, but he
Right.
did teach me how to drive, which I was very thankful for. And then I went and taught Doris Torini how to drive. I'll never forget that. We were on a hill and the car stalled and she started sliding backwards and she's getting hysterical and the car behind us and she's sticking her arm out telling the driver, go around me, you know. Remember that? Doris and Mrs. Torini were really nice. He had passed away. And Doris worked as a waitress and Mrs. Trini worked in the kitchen. Heavy-set woman. They were really nice people. I liked them. In fact, I talked to Doris. I called her up, must have been about 8 months ago, just to see how she was. And she sent me a picture of her and her little dog. Her husband also passed away. And anyway.
Now, junior high school years, how did you get along with your mother?
During my high school years,
Mhm.
fine. Mom and I got along good. I'll never forget this one time. Now this is when I got older, okay, and I was dating. Well, I really wasn't dating Jimmy Greco. There was a group of them. There was Jimmy Greco and Frank Ianni and the Orizzetti boy, and there was another young fellow. Anyway, Jimmy was going to college. He became a lawyer and is now a judge. Of course, by now he's probably retired. The Orizzetti boy, his dad owned an Orizzetti furniture store, and he took over the store, but then it caught fire. And whether they ever replaced that store or not, I don't know. I should look it up in the telephone book, because I have a Sioux telephone directory. Anyway, and then Frank Ianni, his dad had a tailoring shop for suits and such. And I think he took that store over, but I'm not really completely sure. Anyway, we would all get together. Frank, they belonged to the Junior Chamber of Commerce, okay? And we would all get together, and Jimmy would call up and he'd say, I had a beauty parlor at that time. He would call up and say, hey, Carmel, he says, a bunch of us are getting together. You want to come? And I'd say, yeah. And all together it was about 2 years that we would go out with him. But it wasn't boyfriend, girlfriend. In fact, I said to my mother one time, I'll never forget that, I said, Ma, you think there's something wrong with Jimmy? He's never kissed me, you know? But it wasn't that kind of a date. It was just more or less we would go. In fact, I remember cooking 2 chickens. I got up early that morning. We were going out to Harmony Beach. And I roasted 2 chickens with potatoes and carrots around it. And I often think what Mama thought of it afterwards. We had built a bonfire, you know, and they took the Mama's roaster to heat up the chicken and the potatoes and everything. I can imagine what that roaster looked like when we got it home. Never gave it a thought then. Now I do. I think, holy cheese, you know. But what was the question you asked me?
So they used to all meet at the Junior Chamber of Commerce, you said?
Well, I don't know where they used to meet. They came and picked us up. Oh, and I'll never forget this. They would pick me up, you know, and they would use their dad's car, because none of the boys had cars.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we couldn't afford them then. They were going to school and they couldn't afford cars. So they would use their dad's car on the weekend when they were home from school. Anyway, we used to go to the Harmony Beach during the summer months. And there and another place, I'll tell you about the other place later. Coming back from Harmony Beach one time, we had 2 carloads of people, and one of the cars got a flat tire. And for some ungodly reason, they didn't have a spare tire, or something happened that they couldn't fix it right away. So nobody had cell phones in those days, you know. So we all had to get into one car to go home. Well, that was really tricky. 2 loads of people in one car, and then somebody stayed with the other car. And anyway, we got home late at night. Okay.
Sure.
And my mother was hysterical. I'll never forget this as long as I live. She come out at the door. The car pulled up in front, and not even into the driveway, just in front of the house. And she come out of the sunroom, and here this light is on behind her. She's all lit up behind her with lights, you know. And she's standing there on the stairs, and she's standing there with her hands like this, akimbo, you know. This is a fine time for you to bring my daughter home, and she's yelling this, Well, everybody in the car were like this, hiding. So I got in the house and I bust out laughing. I said, Mom, you look so funny. He's standing there like this, yelling, fine. And we sat down and had coffee, and I told her what everything had, and then she laughed and I laughed. I mean, it was funny. I know, I'll never forget that. I didn't get mad because she was just a concerned mother, Jimmy called the next day and apologized, for getting us home so late, and he explained to her also what I had told her about the flat tire and everything. But I'll never forget that. I can still see her, because she was all lit up with all these lights behind her, and she's standing on that porch, it was funny.
So, how old were you at the time?
But 20,
Now, how long? How did you get along with your father?
Fine. I actually got along good with my mother and dad. I really did. They I did.
Did you high school years have any friends that were adults or anything like that at that time?
No.
No. Did you ever go back to school after
No.
10th grade?
No, then I met your dad.
Yeah. Okay. What, have you stayed in touch with any friends since school?
Well, on occasion, like I said, last year I did. I called Lena Perugini, and I called Elvira and found out that she had just passed away. She was a sweetheart. In fact, her picture is in downstairs. I have a menu from one of the restaurants in the Sioux, and her brothers had opened up a restaurant in the Sioux. Her two brothers opened up that restaurant in the Sioux, and her family picture is in there with the two boys and her and her mother and dad. And they have my picture in there when I was about 14 with a bicycle. And they had a couple other pictures in there. Dad's gone down to get it. I will bring it up and see it. And what was the question again? I forgot.
What friends that you might have stayed in touch with?
Yeah.
Since...
Okay, so I called Lena, and I called Mary Lou, and I called Elvira, and I called Doris, and I tried to get a hold of Shirley Stairs, McLean, and she married, what was it? Oh my good heavens, how could I forget his name? Anyway.
So there's no one in particular that you stayed in touch with?
No.
All right.